Okay, so Laughing was a song I've written when I was about 18, and it was after I'd split Jocasta Mark 1. The band started at school with Jack when I was 15. We were both 15, and we did the circuit around Hertfordshire, near Hemel Hempstead and Watford, Berkhamsted, and then I split it up. And I don't actually remember why I split it up, but I think it would have been being driven by wanting to explore more writing and composition. And Laughing was that one song that I just thought, what do I want to do? I don't want to be a pop star, but I do want to make pop music, and I want to be in the Albert Hall with an orchestra, but with an electric guitar. So first things first, write a song that works for that, and that was what Laughing was when I sat down to write it. So it was always, for me, the music at that age was about trying to, like most people at that age, I think, create your own identity, decide who you wanted to be. I kind of wanted to be a bit like John Lennon, but I also wanted to be like the Smashing Pumpkins. I kind of wanted to be like Peter Gabriel, but probably more like Kate Bush, which was tricky because I wasn't female. But I really, if I had been female, I would have ended up like, I don't know, probably like Tori Amos or more modern take on a female that explores similar literary areas of writing pop music, the Anchoress, Catherine Ann Davis. I think it's extraordinary. And so all of my music has been, for the last 23 years, it's my ongoing schizophrenic unresolved exploration of who I am. And so Laughing was structured musically before it was structured lyrically, and a lot of my songs have always been like that. It's a mood and a casting of ideas. I guess if you compare it to a play, I always create the setting and the characters before the story. I suppose it's an easy way to explain it. But I was at that age vehemently anti-establishment. I mean, the Doors was my way into performing. I never wanted to perform. I was a little bit like, I don't know, maybe Noel Gallagher in the early days of Oasis. When I started, I wanted to sit on the amp and play the songs that I'd written and see someone else singing. And the first incarnation of Jocasta was like that, with one of my best friend at school, Jim. And we were all quite into Jim Morrison, I think. And and like all those kind of rock stars or pop stars, I would read everything they read. I would explore everything they did. So that got me into the theatre, and it's double, the Theatre of Cruelty by Antonin Artaud, and performance risks in theatre, which I just, that's what turned me on when I was 17. The idea that you could be performing music and possibly decide to riot was the ultimate goal for me. And I had a lot of that going on for myself in Jocasta, which I think was naive, but I think it made for exciting music and an exciting live, because other British bands, it was just, which I learned to love much later on, Fred Perry's and Bulldogs and Doc Martens. But Jocasta was, we were much closer to Radiohead or the Pumpkins, or maybe we took ourselves seriously. We did. We had two really proficient musicians in the band, Andy and Jack. Andy and Adrian, who were extraordinarily professional and advanced, and had both trained quite heavily since they were little. And then Jack and I were much more like the Pink Floyd sort of art school chums who were approaching it all architecturally or whatever. I mean, I didn't think we saw ourselves like that at the time, but we were like that. We went to a Rudolf Steiner school. We did Eurythmy together once a week, and our heads were in very different places to the rhythm section in the band. So I just thought that was really magical, and I was aware of that, us coming from that different perspective, and I knew that was a kind of formula I thought would be really great, because my older brother had been into funk, and that's how I got into all the Blue Note records and Donald Byrd and even James Brown and stuff like that. And so I was listening to that, and a lot of that was in the Pumpkin stuff. I mean, the best Seattle bands at the time had the most extraordinary rhythm sections, and that obviously crossed over into the Chili Peppers. And so I always wanted American professionalism. It was frowned upon in London at the time. Nobody wanted to see anyone doing guitar solos, and and we were doing all of that. And I think the second we got dropped by Sony, Muse appeared, and it was like, yeah, we were just ahead of the game. But yeah, so that's Laughing. That's what it was. It was my vision for the band, to composition, and of course, a lot of the original demos were my demos with the fake string arrangements and Winston Churchill talking in the middle. It was vastly political, and but then when I think Adrian and Andy got into it, it just became, I thought it was very original at the time. There were bits of Beatles in it. There were bits of Jane's Addiction, maybe, as well, which Jack and I loved. We just loved that band. We listened to it a lot. He introduced me to that band. In fact, Jack introduced me to all the kind of rock and pop music, which I just come from Spain. I've been living in the mountains for 4 years, where the only traffic that I saw on a day-to-day basis were, goats. Living with my mum with a quite limited, small collection of records. So as soon as I met Jack, I never dreamt of forming a band or having other people around me that felt passionately about music and sharing that experience. That was very much down to Jack. So that's why I think why it says on the Wikipedia that Jack and I formed the band. And we sat next to each other at school, and that was my first love of a man, really, as a friend and as like a brother, and that got me more hooked on music than I was prepared to be. I thought I had it all under control, and then everything opened up. He played me the Red House Painters, he played me the Stone Roses, he played me Jane's Addiction, he played me The Wedding Present, he introduced me to so much music, and that was it. I was gone down the rabbit hole. So Go is the song that, if anybody remembers Jocasta as a band, and that's the kind of single that, because it was playlisted on Radio 1, and we were B listed, and it went up to the A list, and and Joe Wiley was championing that song, which I was thrilled about, and so the rest of the band. But I remember writing it. I wrote it, and I never thought it was anything particularly special. And I wrote it on a couch in Shepherd's Bush. I think it was called Oakland's Grove, and it was where Adrian and Andy were both living at the time. And that was how I wrote a lot of songs on the way to see them on the tube. I used to get the tube from Soho, where I was living on Charing Cross Road, and I'd get the tube from Tottenham Court Road over to Shepherd's Bush, see them, and I would always write songs. It was funny, I never had anything to record them on, but I'd get there, and there'd invariably be a guitar there that belonged to one of Adrian's other flatmates, and I'd always sit down and work something out. And so that's where I wrote Go, but it was like that thing that you hear with a lot of bands. It was slower and a bit more kind of maybe a bit more musical theatre or something. And then we got into rehearsal room, and Adrian and Andy just hacked it to pieces into this kind of like tank of a song. and that was the magic of being in the band. And then Jack started coming out with these extra licks that I'd never thought of, on guitar, and that's how I suppose the three of them encouraged me to become more of a writer, because as soon as I brought songs into them, they brought all these different elements that I didn't imagine into it, which just made me go, right, well, I'll just strum the chords. And by default, I just turned into a rhythm guitarist. Sometimes I did a little bit here and there, but the more we progressed with each other as a band, I got lazy with guitar playing. I am lazy with guitar playing, to be honest. And I'll record stuff in the studio and whatnot, and take lots of care and attention. But live, I just want to think about the performance. And so that was how Go came together. Lyrically, it's I can't explain it. I just want to go, 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 go. I never wanted to stay in more than one place. With my love in the air, I wanted to be a version of me. And though it seems I never wanted to stay in more than one place, but I just want to go. I think you can tell I was quite confused. There was an element of always wanting to be on the go and going somewhere. Never wanted to stay in more than one place. And yes, there were various versions of me. I think like any other 19-year-old probably, I was just singing about them. And the philosophy in it, I suppose, day by day is all you get. I felt like that then. I still feel like that now. I don't think I've lived a day since I was a teenager that I haven't thought it might be my last. I still do. I think any artist does that, really, because you value the time you have to make stuff and share stuff. So that was Go. But yeah, live, it was incredible. And I think it was probably one of the ones that maybe the record companies that were interested in us, like One Little Indian and Sony, obviously, it kind of went, wow, what's this? But it was a very diverse time. I mean, people kind of label that 90s as Britpop, but you had Blur and Oasis on one side, you had Suede bringing, that whole Bowie and the glam stuff in at the same time as Reef. We're kind of like, oh, hello, it's free for the 90s. And then Radiohead, and it was so diverse. There wasn't, if people just talk about Britpop and Blur, Oasis and Pulp and Sleeper and Echo Belly and all this very kind of poppy stuff, because that's pop. That was pop, wasn't it? But we weren't pop. We were rock, and it's why people like Noel Gallagher were always taking the mickey out of me. We bumped into them in the Keith Moon bar at the Astoria. We were making kind of pompous rock, and we were doing it quite well because it was a tight band, and so yeah, it wasn't strictly in keeping, but we did think, well, if Radiohead can get away with it, then so can we. And we did, because we had a lot of fans at the time. So that was Go. Go did really well. I mean, it was released twice. We did it the first time, and Steve Lamacq kind of picked it up on the evening session, and it was a kind of indie release, even though Sony were lurking in the background, funding everything. And then when we got moved from one label to another in Sony, and we ended up with the Manics and Michael Jackson, all those people are epic. Then we released it, and then that's when it sort of it kicked off, and we knew it because we'd done a gig with Octopus and Manson in Belgium, and we came back off the ferry, and I remember we came into Dover, and somebody, I think one of the guys at the passport control said, "Oh, what's your name then? What are you called?" And somebody said Jocasta, and, "Oh yeah, we just heard your song, Go Go Go," and all that on the radio. And it was, those are the things you get into a band for, I suppose, which I didn't know at the time because I was too busy, swatting up on whatever Greek history and literature that I thought was important to write about. But it was, looking back on it, stuff like that was really, really special. Life in a Day was a song I remember writing in my flat above what is now the Phoenix Artist Bar, but then called Shuttleworths, on the Charing Cross Road. The Phoenix Bar downstairs at the Phoenix, which was, that was the hotbed of, I suppose, the music industry and the theatrical world in the West End in the 90s, because it had pub prices and stayed open till 3 or 4 in the morning. And I lived above it, and there was many a night where either the cast of Blood Brothers will end up in my place, or I'm trying to remember the names of the journalists, but I can't. A lot of very naughty journalists, I won't mention their names, it's not fun, a lot of them are still working, but there were NME and Melody Maker people, and I think most of them are working for The Guardian now. But it was a fun time, and I used to pick up a lot of stories whilst I was living there, and that was the beginning of me writing about Soho. And Life in a Day was absolutely about a girl that I knew who worked on a door opposite the club where I was working. Actually, she worked on the door, which is now Soho Radio, and it was just one of those things, you write what you see, and it was this girl that come in from out of town and had dreams of doing all sorts of exciting things with her career. She fancied herself as an actress or a singer or something like that, and she wasn't really, and sadly she ended up getting into all kinds of naughty things, and as happens in Soho, and it was kind of a thing to see when you're working in that area across months and you don't see someone for a few days, and you kind of go, "Oh, where have they gone? Oh yeah, she topped herself," and it's that kind of wow. And I just would write about anything. I never questioned whether it was right or wrong to write stuff then. I don't think you do when you're young. You just, because you're writing every day, and so I wrote that in the flat on the Charing Cross Road, looking out the window at St Martin's at the time, which was there, and it was the first time, actually, just as this is a songwriter thing, it was the first time I'd studied. I didn't study it, but I'd kind of picked up the idea of metering. So metering is when you take the same metering from another song and use it in your own. I'm not going to say which song it is because then people will work out what it was. But yeah, it's by no means illegal. Hundreds of songwriters do it, and shockingly, some people do it with songs. They used the same metering of a song that came out like 6 months ago. I was at least doing it with a song that was had come out 30 years beforehand. So yeah, I remember writing that song, and there was a real Lennon-y Beatles, late Beatles feel about it. You know, Joe's just gonna blow her life in it. And I was doing it a bit Ray Davis-y as well, with the storytelling vibe. And I just thought of it as a folk song, and I just never. And the guys in the band said, "Oh, what about that song?" I think, and I was like, "Nah, it's like really parochial. It sounds like people should be Morris dancing, or maybe it's like one of those songs that would have appeared in The Wicker Man. It sounds like really hippie-ish." And then, of course, Adrian and Jack and Andy started fiddling around with one thing and another in the studio, and and suddenly the song sounded like, wow, sounds like modern kind of, I don't know, I can't even explain that. I think it's one of the most original sounding songs that I've ever recorded, and by the time the orchestra recorded their parts on it, it was just, I don't know, it did sound very Bowie. It sounded kind of straight out of that Visconti universe of production, which is a combination really of the band and Bruce Lampcov, who, you know, produced the album. And it's the song that, because I kind of fell in love with doing it, with the gigs. There were some songs, and that was one of them, that I just missed doing so much, which is why I re-recorded it again later on my third solo album, Secrets of Soho. I did a different version. But yeah, so that's the history. I suppose it's that mark on the album, of the Soho-ness of the background of the band, which was mostly me and Jack. Although, you know, we were all in Soho all the time at that time. It was just me and Jack that were blacklisted by the police. Change Me was probably one of the favourites of our fans at shows, and other people's fans, when we were supporting other bands like Ash and you know, Baby Bird and all these kind of other artists that we were supporting. People went mental when we did Change Me, and I guess it was I wanted to do a rap, and, you know, not like a rap that sounds like rap, but just my own take on that. And it was, I loved fitting in lots of words. I mean, I just like, because I started with writing poetry anyway. It was, you know, before I'd even picked up a guitar, and I wanted something with that same, it's about that like angry Lennon, early 70s, and that was where my head was at when I was writing it and arranging it, at the time of, I think we'd already been picked up by Sony, and I was asked to go and write a load more songs, and that was one of the ones. And I just finished reading a autobiography, can't remember, anyway, it's a book about Malcolm McLaren, and then I saw him in Bar Italia one day, or maybe night, and I just walked up to him and told him that I was, you know, a singer, and I just signed with a record company, blah, 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 blah. And did he have any advice? Which I thought was a hilarious thing, looking back, to be asking Malcolm McLaren for advice on being signed to a record company. But he just looked at me, gave me a funny look, and said, "Change Me." And that's right, and that sort of prompted me to get the book, and I read the book, and it was something that he used to say at art school, apparently. And I thought it was great, and it was very how I felt at the time. I thought, you know, could see the world and how people were in the world, and I could see myself in it. I was like, I don't want anybody to be pigeonholing me or categorizing me like everybody else seems to be. So it was like I was asking the whole world to change me on a constant basis. Be careful what you wish for, I suppose, because I've changed ever since. Stop. But so that was what it was, and I don't need to sell a story to a second-rate tabloid. I don't need to look good because I don't want a friend's approval. It really was. You can all go to hell. I'm on my own trip. I mean, it was fed up. I was fed up with a lot of the stuff that I was seeing on the news. I'm fed up with people behaving like sheep and slaves. I still am. Nothing's changed. It got worse in many ways, but that's what the song was about. And again, I think the song really kind of, it turned into a production piece. There is a song I can pick up a guitar and play it, but I mean the actual song, the recording, is I think it's remarkable. And what we all did as a band on it. Once I gave them the song, I thought, they took it out of the 70s and put it straight into the mid 1990s. And Jack playing guitar that sounded like an ambulance siren, and Andy's bass line, which was just like nobody was doing better apart from Radiohead maybe, but not even that much. I mean, this was like a really funky bass line, which it drove the whole thing. And Aid kind of put in so much hip hop into that track, which it's why the band did sound different and original. And I'm sure we would have continued and made all the albums I had planned us to make together. Actress. So Actress is kind of like the weird song on the album, although it fits when you listen to the record now, or when I listened to it at the time, it fit. I was worried that I was kind of attached something onto it, but I knew that Andy and Jack and Adrian would have said no, you can't have that on the album if there was something wrong with it. But I think because their taste was so eclectic, and they'd been listening to Nick Drake like I had, after Jim Warren was our dear friend who was our sound engineer and who has been Radiohead's sound engineer for since the beginning. And so we were lucky whenever Radiohead went on tour, we tended to do gigs because we could work with Jim. And he'd introduced us to a lot of the stuff which I think he probably heard listening with Tom York and the rest of the band. So we were lucky. We were kind of hearing their library, and Nick Drake was in there, and of course immediately I started writing all this kind of madrigal style songs, and that was one of them, Actress, which actually, when you line the lyrics up, if you look at the lyrics, the certain things are spelt. If you read the words down, there's a code. So the lyrics sort of make sense. I mean, they do make sense, but you can read them from top to bottom, and there is actually secret messages in there, folks. Which, of course, nobody heard because Sony killed the album. Was it about a real actress? No. I wanted to write a song called Actress. However, it ended up being about a woman who I met, who I was fond of, and she wanted to be an actress, and so I kind of based it on her, but the song sort of wrote itself, really. And it was thrilling because Joe Richards, who now known as Joe Lewis, wrote the cello arrangement on that, and which was the first kind of, I usually arranged all, and I still do, arrange strings and for the songs that I write, because I often arrange and write that at the same time as the song. But this was different. I'd just done this on guitar, and Joe came up with that. And of course, Joe was in a relationship with our bass player Andy, and they've been married ever since. And so it was really nice that real life stuff happened through the creation of this album. Leave the Light On. This, do you know what? This was a song that I'd written when I was, I think, 17, and I'd finished Jocasta. So Jocasta I'd split the band up, and I was concentrating on, I think, going to art school and all that, which I didn't do, of course, but I set up a fantasy band in my head, which I don't know why, but I called the band The Hysterical Pregnancies. And I wrote all these songs which were a bit wild, and you know what, they were sort of Henry Rollins kind of, Steve Albini. It was like I wanted to do something I think I'd just been listening to In Utero, to be honest, by Nirvana, and gone, I would need to do something basic with just a drum kit, a bass guitar, and a really out of tune, noisy, distorted guitar, and scream, and that was, I did that for a couple of months ago. I got bored, but I remember Leave the Light On being a song that I wrote in the middle of that, and it's a very peculiar song. The lyrics that start, I wish I was sad like a cliched granny, stuck to the stars for tall, dark and handsome strangers. I mean, I was always comparing myself to women for some reason, and in that one, I was miserable and unhappy, and I didn't know why, and I thought it wasn't justified. I thought, why am I unhappy? I'm only 17, and so the song was that was, and it was literally, I used to leave the light on, because it felt like someone would be home, and when I got home, but of course there wasn't, because I was living on my own, and yeah, oh goodness, remember going into a whole other area there. Yes, I mean, I've lived pretty much on my own and in other people's houses since I was 13. So I think there was an element of that thing of hearing other people going home and coming home. Oh, hello, with my friends and their mums and their dads being there and all that. And so I used to leave the lights on, and that's kind of what the song was about. But then when the version I'd recorded on my own was just very, raucous. And then I brought it to the band, and they shaped it into something really beautiful, which inspired me then to go get into the whole world of backing vocals, and I sort of went into that whole, actually very Tori Amos kind of a Carmina Burana style backing vocals section in the middle eight. I am nothing special, the rose trapped me to... it was like really high drama. And when we did it live, I mean, it was one of my favourites, because it kicked ass, that song. And it was one of those ones, it was so tight. When we finished it, it was that thing where we were all looking at the audience. The audience was just looked like they'd shat themselves because of the music. Yeah, that was a really great part of Jocasta live. Something to Say sounds to most people like a relationship song. It sounds like a song about all kinds of maybe betrayal and divide between two people that love each other. However, I just wrote the song. It just came out, and at the time actually I was in a very happy relationship with my girlfriend at the time. Well, I was happy anyway, but yes, it's something to say was all about. I know I wrote that one on the tube. Wrote it on the Central Line, coming back from Shepherd's Bush, probably about 1995. I suppose arrangement-wise, it was very much in my head that I wanted to do something Billy Corgan-esque. That Siamese Dream album was just actually, that's become part of my DNA, that album. And, for certainly the heavier rock stuff that I've done, that's what it's always come from. And the dynamics, the absolutely kind of critical dynamic between quiet and unbearably loud, which I still think Billy Corgan did much more successfully perhaps than Nirvana, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, that song was something that it's really hard to describe, because it was the first song that I became very, very, very impassioned singing without really knowing why, because I didn't it wasn't a true story. There was no memory there, so it was maybe the beginning of the acting I was doing performance wise. The actual recording of everything that you hear on that song, from Adrian's drums and Andy's bass line and the string section and Jack's guitar, was all about 90% exactly what was on my demo. So that was one of the first Greedy songs I wrote. I mean, it's like that with some of them. It was like that with some of them. Adrian made a good point. They're saying you've put in too many kick drums here, but which was, I remember, I was like, yeah, right, thanks. And I just get so excited because, I wasn't a drummer, but I knew what the beat was meant to be. But when it came to hi-hats and the amount of kicks and things like that, sometimes I got too overexcited. So it was really thrilling then to have someone like Aid kind of go and often play it, and then he'd play it for real, and I go, wow, that's what it's meant to be like, and you've got a shit-hot drummer playing what you heard in your head, and you've tried to kind of simulate with the computer. And exactly the same with the rest of the band. I mean, it was the fun thing. I think, I don't know, some bands will get together and do stuff, and we didn't do that so much. It was always me coming to them going, oh, I've got this song, and they would take it into a different, not a different direction, but they'd add armory to it, and make it, it was always in a vulnerable condition when I gave the guys a song, and they could see the weak points, and they made it stronger and they made it better. So with Something to Say, there was a lot of space in that song. It was long. I think it's 5 minutes or something. It's crazy. But it was all like hooks all over the place, and it was the beginning of me kind of going, why do people only have one chorus? I'm going to write two. Which people loved. I mean, I know people loved, because they used to come and tell me, and other musicians would come and tell me, and musicians in other bands that were really much more successful than we were at the time, and so it was lovely. I actually played that to Liam Gallagher backstage when Oasis played Bournemouth. That was one of the first gigs they played Wonderwall at, and I remember him seeing the title, Something to Say. He says, we've got a song called Some Might Say. It's not like that, is it? And I obviously hadn't heard Some Might Say at that point. But yeah, it was, I felt really happy. I was only 20 or something when I wrote it. And I think it still stands up. It's a hard song to sing if you haven't got that sort of Freddie Freddie Mercury Top Range thing, which I did then, but and now I almost do, but it's exhausting singing that song, which is why I haven't done it very much since. Single as Hell started off as a word game, really. I just like words. I have shelves. Oh, well, they're not on shelves anymore. They're all packed away. But I have all these books of my own reference library, I suppose. I write words in books, and so when I'm writing songs, I just go to them and look at phrases or words that I've kind of got hooked on, and start pulling them out and putting it into a song that I'm writing. And I had that whole heaven and hell thing go on, and single and double, and that's heavens with our double standards will be single as hell. And actually, I think I wrote that first, and I was then going to go and write the entire song in the same way. And then I thought it might be nicer to sort of write a story instead of just having this fun game that meant nothing to anybody apart from me. So Single as Hell was actually kind of about, it was about someone who cheated on me, and was very young, and everyone was very young, to be honest. And but I was sort of taking a position of where none of us are perfect. Not that I hadn't done something that awful, but I was certainly far from perfect. And so it was that with all of our, with these double standards, we'll end up without each other, and which was true in that case. But I was singing it for everyone, really. It's like the double standards stuff that can really just destroy beautiful things in our lives sometimes. And I remember using a Oberheim DX drum machine to demo this with Jack, who then I kind of got back together with after splitting Jocasta up, and we did the first demo of that, and he played all these beautiful guitar lines, which were his, and it was lovely. It was very gentle, and it was really kind of like I suppose, somewhere between Sting and Crowded House. I mean, I never knew who I wanted to be in terms of an artist, but any of those guys with just like writing, I admired so much, especially the writing and in the emotional connection of those artists' songs. And I suppose that's what I built my stuff on when I was younger, was how I wanted to connect. That was why I was doing it. So Single as Hell had that element, and it was, and then of course with Adrian and Andy, when they started putting together the arrangement on the drums and the bass, that kind of jazz dynamic of something dropping to a heartbeat was so powerful live, and it turned me into a better performer, I think. I could never have. I'd just ended up like those other bands that you see popping up from time to time. I shouldn't be rude, really, should I? But there are some bands that have been doing the same thing since the 90s, and they haven't changed, and that's great because it works. It's good for business, isn't it? But I didn't want to be good for business. I wanted to develop and grow, and I did that with the band very quickly. Hopefully it'll continue to do so, but it was that magic that every time I brought a song in, it was flat, and then the band would shake it up, and I go, whoa, it's a real trip now, it's a journey, and I've got to front this. So the beginning of the band, just before we got signed and then during, was very much how I learnt to perform, really. And that song in particular, there were some lines in that song. I think one of them was from an Edward Albee play. It might have been, from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. There were some lines that were sort of stolen maybe, from that. And this is a drama that I was playing out in the song, and it was about pain and love, and none of us really being straight with each other about what it is we really want, because sometimes it's not love, sometimes we want conflict.
Let's not get too carried away by this, even though there's been a lot of coincidences. It shouldn't.
When I think back to Perfect, I always remember Adrian saying, "That's the hit. You've written a hit." And I don't think anybody at the time disagreed with him. It was just a shame that nobody in the record company were either on the phone or listened to the album. otherwise we may have actually had a hit with what is actually probably a hit song. But it's I've done that a lot over the years, that song, just because it's close to, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a perfect pop song because I wrote it, but it's that 3.5 minute, there's no fat on it. It does exactly what it's meant to do, and it's real, and it makes sense, and it moves people, and it moves me to perform it. And maybe someone else will do it and make it into a hit, because somebody should. It's such an important song for Jocasta. Again, it was that side where I don't think the record company really knew what we were. They were sort of, they're too busy getting hung up on who else we were like. They were always comparing me to Tom York, and there were similarities with the band, but it's not really between me and Tom York. And it was a case of, we used to do a lot of really loud, energetic, kind of sexy rock songs, and then suddenly we'd sort of go into this whole emotional, very feminine territory, full of sensitivity, and where you could hear the lyrics, and everyone, and it was that thing, you used to have girls crying and stuff like that, and coming up to me and talking about what it meant. It was such an incredible time for me when I look back on it. Spoiled, I suppose, and that's, gosh, when you've had that at a young age, and you've managed to connect, you've had the opportunity to, because you wouldn't have that without a major marketing push from a label like Sony, which they did do, despite the fact that not any of the people working there really knew who they were pushing with us. It really, it's why I wanted to re-release the album, I suppose, because it does matter to me personally. It's certainly nothing to do with making money or anything. It's just a case of it's not available. I thought it should be. And Perfect, it's the first ambiguous song I wrote, because of course some people think when you sing the words "we're perfect on our own," it's in the context of two people together, because it sounds like a love song. But I didn't only mean it like that when I wrote it, because I was singing it and thinking, we're actually perfect when we're completely on our own. I didn't mean it in opposition to being in a couple or in a relationship. I just meant it meant it in both ways, and I suppose it was like we're perfect when we've escaped from everything else, whether we're one person or two. And it was, I was proud of that. I never stopped to think about whether I was proud of anything I did when I was that age. I just did it, and didn't think about it very much. But I did with that one because other people, other writers, and you know, people in the business and stuff that paid attention, I suppose, talked about it, and that yeah, no end of good for my ego. But yeah, and I loved that. I loved singing it with Andy as well live, because it was Andy was the first other singer I'd ever sung with. I never wanted to sing anyway, and I'm not a singer. I sing, and I've got a fairly strong voice, but I don't think of myself as a singer in inverted commas. He sings like a singer, and it was so nice because it reinforced the kind of bonkers take on singing that I have, and you listen to it, it's very heartwarming. It's a moment. I always used to try and write songs like moments. It's like that moment in the film. You think of a film like Love Actually, there's a moment in it where Emma Thompson goes into the bedroom on her own, and she thinks she's found out that her husband is sort of having possibly an affair, and this beautiful piece of acting, and it's a moment in the film. It's got nothing to do with anything else in the film. It's probably one of the most important moments in it, though, and it's so moving. It just tears you to pieces. It does me. And I've always written songs like that. What is this scene? What's happened here from the beginning until the end? That's why I really struggled, playing songs where people are talking. That's why I work in theatres. I don't like, can't stand being at gigs where people are just sitting around talking and drinking. Why? Go home, we put this together. It's a show, and that's the thing, I suppose. That's why I'm a bit show busy, and slightly megalomaniac, I suppose. But you do feel like that about song. I think when you've crafted it, you want people to hear from the beginning, and them to go on the journey that you've intended them to go on until it's over. With Face You, I really wanted to have one song that was acoustic but not ballady. It's not it kind of goes into ballad territory, but it's not, because it's got a pace to it, and I wanted something that was stripped down, that had a pace, and I guess it ran the theme again of that there was a strong emotional love life somewhere in the midst of this record that I was trying my best to disguise with all kinds of encoding in the lyrics, but it wants to come out of you when you're writing. It'll come out, and Face You Again was sort of about a breakup, which was real again, and we did get back together, and yeah, it was about trying to. I think I was exploring how to be understanding to someone that's hurt you, and that comes out in a few of the songs, particularly in Face You. It's not. You can tell when I look back on it. It was like, you love so much, or you need someone so much, you sort of end up forgiving them for all kinds of things, which is, I don't think, in hindsight, that's not healthy, but it's kind of what the song was exploring. It was wrong. It's wrong. You have to stand your ground, really, when people are rotten to you. You don't need to fight, but I think you need to stand your ground. I was far too needy. I needed so much when I was that age. And it was great because I don't know whose idea it was to put the Hammond organ on it. I think it might have been Andy's, or maybe Bruce Lampkov, who produced the record with us. But I think it's me playing it as well, badly. But I loved it because it was a real Hammond with a Leslie speaker, and I think it belonged to Matt Johnson, because it was in Matt Johnson's studio from where we recorded the album. Yeah, I like that song. I remember playing it at Aberystwyth University as an encore funny the things you remember. In 1996, they said they want you to do another song, and I don't think we'd had anything ready at the band, so I was pushed on to go and do that, I think. And yeah, it's a lovely song. I don't think I won't call it a Jocasta song, because it's just me with a guitar. But I think it has its place on the record.
You can have what you need from me, but till then I can't wait to face you. Till then I can't wait to face you, 'cause I know we will be again. Yes, I know we will be again.
Crackbaby. Well, I mean, that's an interesting title, isn't it? The idea, I mean, people assume, don't they, when you're kind of like a rock and roll band or a rock band, and you look skinny, you look like you're on drugs and all the rest of it, they just think, oh, I guess singing about drugs. It wasn't about that at all. And at that time, I wasn't actually on drugs when I wrote that song. I was writing about the idea of a sort of fantasy movie whereby, because there was a lot of talk about crack babies at the time, that babies born with the actual craving for cocaine, and which is horrific, obviously. But I just thought, and then I was reading books about the Second Coming as well, and Jesus returning, and I suddenly thought, well, what if he were born as a crack baby? What kind of Messiah would that be? So I know this is without drugs, you see. That's how I thought of it, and that is what the song's about. It's not about drugs, glorifying them or anything at all. It's about the horror of imagining that our Saviour might be born with an enormous addiction for something, whereby this time we'd all have to die for him because of these. I was very, very against the church, very, very, too much really. Obviously I still have lots of issues with the church, but at that time I just couldn't stand anything to do with Catholics and or what they were preaching, and that was very much to do, he died for our sins, when it was I was reversing the whole thing and saying about what would happen if we would have to die for his, next time he came around. And I don't even know if I'd explained that all to the band. I'm pretty certain Jack knew about it. Jack was always, he used to talk about those things, which I loved so much when we made this album. I think Andy and Adrian were very much concerned with the musicality, as they would do, because they're kind of born musicians. And Jack was a real feedback, a sounding board, I should say, for me, with lyrics and where my head was at. That was a very strange place to be at. It was good to talk to someone about it, because I kind of believed in what I was writing, but I never knew why, and I didn't really know why it was coming out of my head. But that shows you see, not a single person at Sony flagged it up. No one said, hang on a minute, what's this song about? I don't think they did anyway. Well, nobody said it to me. And live, that was the one that really, it just kicked ass. It was so great to play that live. And when we did our to us, it was a very sort of momentous tour. I think we did 75 dates in the UK, consecutive dates. I think we did 2 days off in which we shot a video, but we were touring, I think, at first with the 60-Foot Dolls and Ash, and then we toured with Honey Crack. And it was an amazing song, Crackbaby, to do live. Did we finish the set? I think we did. We finished the set, or we did it just before. We'd finished the set with Change Me, because that really got everyone going. But Crackbaby was crazy, and we did it so long, and the end of the song went on for so long that one night I think it was at Rock City in Nottingham. I would get down on my knees and do a headstand in the middle of the band playing, and I don't think I mentioned it. I might have mentioned it to them the first time. I can't remember, but I was doing it because we were getting bored. I had nothing to do in that bit of the song. And then every night we would do that. And of course, Adrian would have a cue, I think, with the drums as to when the song was going to finish. But he stopped. He wouldn't do the cue. So I learned inadvertently how to do a yogic headstand for, I don't know, 10 minutes in the end. And I can still do that. And of course, I brought that back when I started doing the Soho Hobo shows at the Soho Theatre. I don't know. Part of it's just showing off. Another part of it is it's a real... what's the word? I don't want to make it sound lascivious, but it's sort of... It's not an orgasm, but when you turn your body round upside down, the blood rushes to your head, and then because you hear the music, and the drums are going furiously, and the guitars are smashing into your skull. So the longer you stay upside down, the blood is really, all in your head. So then when I turn back round, it would come streaming down at the same time as the sound kind of swirling upside down. And my orientation just been, I kind of got addicted to it, really. That's the headstand thing. People always say, "Well, you're good at yoga." I'm like, I just do the headstand. Once I'd learnt that was all I needed. But it doesn't, obviously it only works with the music. Inside Out is a song that I wrote at our first kind of professional recording session that Sony were funding at Psalm West, which was the famous studio where they did Band Aid, which I didn't know at that time, and that's where I met George Michael as well. And we were recording songs that ended up becoming B-sides and a version of Go that never made the cut. It just wasn't happening. I think it might have had strings on that version. I'd love to hear it. But anyway, we were there for many days, and it was all, it was quite expensive, I think. We were working with a fantastic producer who produced my first solo album, Tristan Norwell. And anyway, everyone went out the studio, and I stayed in there playing the grand piano and wrote Inside Out. And I think that's what happens with me. It's a grandiose song. It's somewhere between, Bowie's Time Takes a Cigarette and A Day in the Life by Lennon and McCartney. And that's what happened. If you put a grand piano in front of me, I'm not going to write a little ditty for a Morris dance. I don't know. I'm terrible at a lot of things, but if given the right circumstances and tools for making stuff, music or otherwise, I do tend to rise to the occasion, and even not being not a very good pianist at all. But somehow I came up with that chord sequence, which I've never met a musician who wasn't fascinated by it, actually. And a lot of pianists have played that song over the years because I've always done it, and it's the only thing that's made me realise that I'm not bad at writing a tune, but it took a long time before that became a kind of band thing. It was maybe it was our Sgt. Pepper's moment in the studio, because it was just very straightforward, piano, guitars, and then suddenly, it became what it is. And I think it's a really quite extraordinary progressive track. I'm still surprised how young I sound on it. I sound younger on that song, which was one of the last ones that I did, than on the other 11 tracks on the album, I think. I don't know why that is. I think in my head it was very much a composition that was planning for album 2. It was like, okay, we're going to get enough now with this whole sort of indie pop rock songs, and let's do something that's really extraordinary and theatrical, actually. And that was, I was 20, 21, no, I was 20. I'd grown out of the idea of really just wanting to do simple rock songs by the time I was 20, which is probably why I've had such an unorthodox career in music. I couldn't have done what the Stereophonics did, or what Ash did, or even amazing bands, but I just couldn't keep doing it, the same thing like that. And that was Inside Out. So it was almost, I was kind of putting the nail in the coffin myself creatively into what Jocasta could have been, because it was never going to work with Sony, even if we had stayed. And it didn't, because when I started sending over the demos for the second album, I mean, they just were like, what is this? And I've listened to some of them since and gone, well, yeah, what is that? On the other hand, if they'd have allowed us the chance to have developed them with the band, because it was just me doing the demos on my own at the time for the second album, I think something truly remarkable would have come out of it, because anything that I gave to the band generally became very just something really, really special. But anyway, Inside Out, oddly, in my sort of effort to do this sort of mini operatic kind of excursion into strange chord sequences and strange lyrics and a lot of different sounds, actually it's a pop song, and with only 2 choruses, which is because I wanted to blow up the studio at the end with the sound of the orchestra doing a similar thing to what George Martin did with the orchestra on Day in the Life, although I was doing it, with notation. It wasn't just let's tune to the lowest and play to the highest note we can. It was that and an arrangement of what I'd done for the strings, but it was still structured. It wasn't unstructured. We still put the chord on the end, and it was our nod to say we're here, we're here, and we're going to make 13 albums too, like the Beatles. And it was, I've got there's some footage of Adrian actually playing some of the drums on that track, and the drums are great. I mean, there wasn't a song that didn't have some kind of reference to the drum and bass stuff that was going on at the time. And it's in that as well, in some weird places, which I think I'd done on the demo. But then, once Adrian did it for real, it was like, wow, this is old but new, and it was so exciting to me. and I suppose that was the highlight. I think for the whole band as well was watching the orchestra, the London Symphony Orchestra, suddenly perform these string arrangements which I'd done very simply on what do you call it, sound modules, a Roland sound canvas, I think it was called, and an Atari ST. And then suddenly we had like 23 players, and Gavin Wright was leading, and it was at the Angel Studios in Islington. And just phenomenal. And I think that was, they did 2 takes, I think, on Inside Out, and maybe it's a composite of the 2, but I can't remember. But that's extraordinary. Other people were doing, I mean, Oasis did whatever with the strings, and everyone, Oasis have done something, but it was like Hickory Dickory Dock. It was just such a useless effort at taking advantage of having the world at your feet. It was like, come on, guys, what are you doing? Of course, we did. We didn't take anything for granted in Jocasta. We knew how lucky we were, and we worked our arses off to make sure that we knew just what position that we'd been given. Which is why I think I suffered a nervous breakdown when the band got dropped, because it was like, hang on a minute, we were working our butts off here. But, as I've said before, we weren't the only band, but possibly one of the only bands whose record company didn't pick the album up afterwards and just got lost. And I'm just really, really happy that it's not lost anymore.